You've joined the Betamax Video Club. We wind back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and today I've rented Rambo First Blood Part 2. Joining me is Simon Smith. Hi Simon, how are you?
I'm very well, Rich. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for returning so soon with this absolute classic movie. It's 1985. What's so special about this film for you?
For me, as a kid, 13 years old when this was released, this is the quintessential 80s action movie. And it is the movie that sets the genre for 100 other similar movies. When we meet John Rambo in First Blood, you've got quite a serious Sergio Leone, man with no name type film. But what he does is introduces his character, John Rambo, who at the end of the First Blood novel written by David Morrell dies. But Stallone saw some mileage in not killing him off, and Ted Kosheff, who directed First Blood, they argued about this. They wanted to kill Rambo off at the end of the film and have Troutman sort of carry his body out. Teasel was supposed to die as well, but they kept him alive, and you could see that Stallone saw some mileage in this. And what you get as a sequel to First Blood is an absolutely preposterous, bonkers, tight, brilliant 1980s action movie, and that's what I love about it.
And that's pretty much, you've summed up the entire episode I did about First Blood, where one person dies, his hand, which was an accident, and we've moved, was this 5 years later?
Three years later. He's three years into an 8 years. So he got 8 years for what he did at Hope in Washington.
That's not bad, is it?
No, given that he shot up half the town.
It's almost worth doing.
Yeah, I could have killed them all, I could have killed you. Because it's never really revealed what... I mean, Teasel gets carried into an ambulance, doesn't he? So we assume he lives.
Yeah. Because, they did shoot, and we talked about this on the previous episode, where they filmed the ending where he dies.
Yes.
And you just suddenly think, like, as a one-off film, that's great. But what we've got here is very much like Stallone himself, a steroid-pumped lunatic fiasco of a film that is both ridiculous and wonderful in equal measure.
Absolutely right, and that's the whole point. And they even got David Morrell, who wrote Rambo and obviously killed Rambo at the end of the book, to write the novelisation of this before the film was released, based on the James Cameron script. But this film is so well done. It's a terrible, brilliant movie because the premise of it is utterly preposterous, and we get how preposterous it is almost from the pre-title credit at the start, where Troutman, we get an explosion, we get an opening explosion, and effectively what we've got is a prisoner chain gang breaking up rocks in a quarry. Rocks are being blown and they're smashing them into bits with hammers and the first line of dialogue is Rambo, barked by this US Marshal prison guard. And John Rambo wanders over to a fence and he's got the sort of prison blues on. And Troutman's there, played brilliantly by Richard Crenna. Yeah. And he says, a covert operation's being geared up in the Far East. Your name was dug out of the computer as one of 3 most likely to complete the mission. Now that doesn't say a lot for the US Army in 1985.
What sort of computers did they have?
Well, but if your best chance of completing a mission in a communist country is a convicted murderer and veteran with post-traumatic stress disorder, that doesn't say a lot about your current serving soldiers. So we get this talk by the fence, and basically he says he can get him a presidential pardon and get him out of prison if he agrees to take on this suicide mission, which is recon for POWs in Vietnam. So Rambo says he's interested, and as Troutman's walking away from the fence, he says, "Sir, do we get to win this time?" And Richard Crenna just brilliantly deadpan replies, "This time it's up to you." And that's it. That's your pre-title. And this music, this rousing score by Jerry Goldsmith kicks in. And you immediately know that you're not getting a sequel to First Blood. You're getting something. They're taking this character, and like you said, it's like you can almost smell the cocaine jumping off the script. They're just going to take it into ridiculous territory with this film.
And you think about the difference between where Sylvester Stallone was when First Blood came out. He hadn't had any real success other than the Rocky movies. At this point, we're 1985. It's the same year. I think this came out slightly before Rocky IV.
But I think Rocky IV filmed first, didn't it?
Yeah.
He did it in the winter, but then he did it in reverse order.
Yeah. And you think, like, in terms of this, the same time as Rocky IV, his star is on the rise even further. And he talked about how this film is now, this isn't First Blood Part 2, this is Rambo First Blood Part 2, to emphasise the character in the way that the Rocky movies have. And everything that you think about the first film as this critique of post-traumatic stress and how people coming home from war and how they're treated, this is just him as an expendable asset going into what is still a war zone, and there's this whole political message that is, you read about the script issues that they had, and I'd forgotten that James Cameron was so involved.
Up until the point, yeah. So the original plan for this was to have Rambo accompanied by John Travolta as almost like an army cop buddy movie. And Stallone had worked with Travolta a couple of years before because he directed him in Staying Alive, and they were good friends. But as soon as somebody said, I think it was Cameron suggested Travolta as the sidekick, Stallone, probably from ego, he just vetoed it. So they stripped Cameron's script down and got rid of the John Travolta character and kind of replaced it with Julia Nixon's character, which is Co, which complements Rambo quite well. Yeah. And we get this bonkers movie that a convicted murderer who shot up a town with post-traumatic stress disorder is going to go on this mission to try and find POWs in Vietnam. I mean, if you're watching this at the time and you've only met John Rambo as this troubled man who'd had whatever issues he had, I'm not a doctor, and you see him now, he's come out of prison, he's gone to this, and all of a sudden, this is the template of a Cannon movie, where he is dropped into Thailand. You've got Murdoch, played by Charles Napier, who's basically telling him he's got to go on this mission to recon POW camps, not to engage. They're busy. These guys, they're from the CIA, having a laugh, busy drinking their Coke and having their snacks. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight now, this is what every Chuck Norris film had. Well, this is the very odd thing about it being a sequel to First Blood. First Blood was the film that made a lot of people take notice of Sylvester Stallone as a really good actor, and he is. And he shows that again about 10 years later in Copland, that he can do really serious type roles. But what he actually does in this is he takes Rambo back into sort of punch-drunk Rocky territory, so as a monosyllabic type. He never lets you know what you're thinking. So you've got this, and the massive props to Jerry Goldsmith's score in this film, because that's what keeps this film ticking along. You get this rousing music that puts you right behind John Rambo, the character. And when that helicopter touches down in Thailand and he gets off, what Stallone does really well, and George P. Cosmatos, the Mexican director who directed this film, does really well, is they leave you with a bit, you know that you're getting John Rambo from First Blood, because as he steps off the helicopter, he's wearing the same stuff that he turned up in Hope in Washington in. So he's got the red sweatshirt, everything except the green M65 jacket. So you know you've got Rambo, but you've really got this. Stallone he ended First Blood with this really great speech about his friend losing his legs, and he just wanted to come home and be appreciated for what he's done, but people were showing. And then he's out of prison, we're back in Thailand, ready to go out into Vietnam. And we're back into sort of punch-drunk Rocky territory. And he looks a bit bemused by the US Army and the CIA between them have got this great setup. So he jumps off the helicopter and we meet Martin Cove, Martin Cove's character. And we all know Martin Cove as the Cobra Kai dojo guy from the Karate Kid. And a guy called Lifer. And it's clear that these guys are CIA mercenaries, and they're the first guys Rambo meets. And then, like you say, he's taken in to meet Troutman, played brilliantly by Richard Crenna. And Murdoch, who is, I suppose, a CIA bureaucrat. He's an arse covering, and again Charles Napier. Lee Marvin was the first choice for this.
Well, this would have been. I mean, Lee Marvin was clearly looking for work, because this was maybe a year before the Delta Force. So Lee Marvin was still working in that genre. So.
And he did a terrible Dirty Dozen film about a year after Delta Force as well, which was the next about something to assassinate Hitler, but he turned down Rambo because Stallone gets to best him at the end, and Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, we're not having any of that. So Lee Marvin turned him down. So we get Charles Napier, who again had his face taken off by Hannibal Lecter a few years later, and Charles Napier is just wonderful as somebody that's. He oozes untrustworthiness right from the second you meet him.
Well, when you do meet him, he says he was... I didn't write it down, but he was in a particular But
Yeah,
battalion,
so
wasn't it?
he said he was haunched with the 2nd Battalion with the 3rd Marines in Khartoum in '66. And Rambo quietly notes this and shoots a glance at Troutman. And we don't know the relevance of what Rambo's glance was until he's about to get on the plane.
Because then he's lied about his posting, and I suppose it's immediately, that's it in his brain. He's like, well, he's lied about that. What else is he lying about?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a classic that we see. And as Rambo is getting ready, you know, we're taken to this base where there's, you know, they talk about the state-of-the-art military equipment with, you know, no expense spared. And he looks at it, and, you know, this is the guy who could, and shows quite easily, he could take apart most of the country with a knife.
Well, again, Murdoch's character says to Rambo that they brief him about the mission, and he doesn't think he's listening, and he asks Troutman if he's mentally stable, which is a bit late now, because you kind of pick the guy that's going to do this mission for you.
You've taken this guy out of prison and brought him over. Yeah, he's fine.
And when Rambo talks to Murdoch to say that he is listening, you know, the indigenous agent code Bow and stuff like that, he never looks at Murdoch, so he lets him know that he's listening. Yeah. And then you get these little lines from, you know, times change. I've always believed the mind is the best weapon, and stuff like that. And then Murdoch drops on Rambo that he's going into recon and he's just going to take photographs. Yeah. And he says, I'm supposed to leave them there? Yeah. And he's like, you're just strictly not to engage the enemy. And we get this wonderful cutscene that is pure Stallone ego of Rambo prepping for this mission. And it's glistening biceps and it's knife sharpening.
Lingering muscle shots I've got.
I've got glistening biceps. You've got lingering muscle shots. I've got glistening biceps. What's absolutely brilliant about this is for someone that they're sending in to take photographs, they're giving him an awful lot of explosives and munitions.
Oh yeah, I like the fact because he's got his bow and arrow, and even on the arrow tips, which of course we need later on, it actually says explosives.
Just in case Rambo forgets what they are.
In big red letters.
Yeah, so for somebody going on a recon, he's taking an awful lot of kit. It's again, he's supposed to have been re-enlisted in the US Army, but the kit out for this mission is very CIA. It's very Black Ops.
Yeah.
And then Troutman walks Rambo, after we get the glistening muscle shots, Rambo is walked to the plane by Troutman, and then we find out why he's about to get on this plane and he doesn't trust Murdoch. Yeah. And he turns to Troutman just as he's about to board the aircraft and says, you remember when Murdoch says he was humped with the 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines in Khartoum in '66? The 2nd Battalion were in Kutsan. Yeah. You're the only one I trust. And he jumps on the plane.
But is this at the point where Troutman goes to Murdoch and says about, you know, why is he going? Or no, this was on the way to the...
That's right, yeah. So Troutman walks Rambo to the aircraft and the aircraft takes off, and he's off on his mission. Yeah. And he says to Murdoch, POWs, do you think he'll find any? And Murdoch shrugs, doubtful. Yeah. So... And it's
just, again, that bureaucrat side of, well, we need to be seen to be doing something to look for these guys. Because I think the rumour was that there was supposed to be about 2,500 still there.
At the time this film was released, the then Senator John McCain, who was a 10-year POW himself, who was released from the Hanoi Hilton in '75, was trying to get Congress to fund proof that over 2,500 Americans were missing in '85, and that loose script was built around that true fact. And Stallone said he wanted to do a film for the vets. What we get is it's a film for the vets if you're into. But anyway.
Rambo, psychopath vets.
Yeah. Rambo's up in the air in his civilian air. I wrote down the aircraft. I know your people love the aircraft.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Alice.
Yeah, so the aircraft they are on, I'll come back to that. No, it's a civilian Rockwell Jet Commander 1121.
Okay.
Which has never had any military use, but they sprayed it black and they use it as like a CIA insertion aircraft.
It's for the producers who get their hands on what they can.
Well, somebody told me that if you attempted a parachute jump out of one of them, you should have gone straight through the engine anyway.
Well, that's almost what happened.
Well, pretty much, yeah. He gets hung up. This is our first real bit of action, isn't it? So we've got a low-flying aircraft flying over the border from Thailand into Vietnam. Apparently, he's jumping from 250 feet, which... I mean, that's psychotic parachute. Like you don't get a reserve at that height. If it doesn't open, you die.
It's Rambo.
Yeah. And of course his parachute doesn't open.
No. But this is what happens where he jumps out of the plane. One of his many cords from his many pieces of equipment gets caught. He's going to get dragged to death. Basically, you know. And while Lifer is trying to, he's caught, he's hung up. They're messaging back saying abort. And Rambo just gets out his giant knife and starts cutting bits away.
Rather than cut away the strap that's holding him on the plane, he cuts away all his equipment, less his bow and his knife.
Yeah, this is all the superfluous stuff he doesn't need. It's almost a mechanism just for, right, let's drop him with the bare minimum stuff. Yeah. If he hasn't been seen doing it in the montage, it's not worth it.
Well, the other thing, I mean, he's hung up for about a minute, isn't he? And in a plane flying at sort of 500 miles an hour, he wouldn't just be beyond his drop zone. Yeah. He'd have like a good 60-mile walk to...
Because when he does land, all he does is, he looks absolutely fine. He's down to his vest and combats. And all he does is gets his little compass out, has a quick look, and he's, I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah, he kind of has a Geordie fight with a snake. He senses a snake is... So Rambo's on the ground in Vietnam, and the first thing he does is has a fight with a snake. He senses it because he's like... it's kind of alluded to, isn't it, when Murdoch reads out his service record, born 6th the 1st, 47, Bowie, Arizona, Indian, German descent, 59 confirmed kills, 4 Purple Hearts, Congressional Medal of Honour. You got around, didn't you? He can sense a snake descending from a tree behind him. He gives it a throat and then decides to let it live.
That's an extra power he's developed.
Yeah.
So he gets this... I suppose it's designed to look like an old temple. Various relics and statues. See someone in this... How can I put it delicately? I mean, this film doesn't delve too easily around stereotypes. There's a lady in a hat that is clearly a local.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, in order to sell us that she is a disguised fighter, friendly fighter, sort of, Arvin friendly CIA agent contact, we're going to put her in the big, well-known Vietnamese straw domed hat so that we know. Rambo nearly killed, throws her up against a tree with his knife out.
And sees that she's a very conveniently attractive woman and thinks better of it.
Yeah, obviously Stallone might wonder what a Hawaiian woman is doing in Vietnam, but...
after, was it 7 screen tests, do you think he'd know by then?
And Julia Nixon, who plays Cobell, who is his contact, he's utterly beautiful. I mean, she's been walking through the jungle with an AK waiting for this contact who's 36 hours, who's late.
And 60 miles away from where he should have been.
Yeah, but he finds her, because he's got a compass and his knife. And she looks, when he spins around and throws her, she looks great. I mean, the makeup's perfect. She looks absolutely stunning. She looks really good. And then she says, "You came a long way to see Empty Camp. Oh, you're late." Yeah. And then he comes out with, "I got hung up," which in my head starts that awful Madonna song off. You know the what?
Yeah. And this is again, if you look back to where this film origin came from. That's probably the sort of joke that the Travolta character would have made.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Stallone never really feels comfortable delivering it.
No.
And it just falls dead as a joke.
Yeah, and that's probably fair.
So we're sort of 25 minutes into the film now. We've got Rambo into Vietnam, and the next thing we're going to get is pirates.
Yeah, and this is where, having seen this for the first time in, maybe 15 years... I didn't realise, probably at the time, and I think since the 4th and 5th Rambo films have come out, and also having seen Hot Shots Part 2, which this film heavily inspires, it's just how these pirates melt into the film. They're obviously hired to get him into where he needs to be. But it's just, again, and I've written here, stereotypes galore.
There's a lot of exposition on the pirate ride in to the camp. And they find, they're all carrying Russian weapons. They find Russian weapons on the boat, but it's only when they see boxes with Russian writing that we get a hint that the Russians might be involved.
And nothing to do with the prostitutes and the fact they're all standing around smoking. They're like extras from Full Metal Jacket, ogling, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they really are. I mean, we've got the one with the red, you've got the captain in the boat with the red beret, and the rest of them really do look like a ragtag bunch. Yeah. And you can see from Stallone, Stallone's doing a very... I don't trust anybody. I certainly don't trust you. But this is the only junk that's going to get me down the river near the camp.
He just about trusts the attractive woman, but he's only human. And this is we're on the boat ride with these pirates, and as you say, this is exposition.
Well, this is his X Factor moment, isn't it? This is where he gets to do. This is for me Nan type story.
Well, other than the piece of dialogue at the end, which we'll come to. This is his main speaking part of the film, where he's explaining why he's back, what happened before, everything. I mean, he talks about almost summarising the first movie as a war against returning soldiers. It was a quiet war. And
kind of war you don't win.
Yeah, and again, everything hints around either, yes, I'm still the same person from the first film, although you wouldn't think, certainly by the time you get to the end of the film, and also the politics that we mentioned. You know, he said he wanted to make a film for the vets, and everything around the time where it's mid-80s, everything's very patriotic around, you know, America, but he's almost railing against that.
Well, the other thing we get in this is this wonderful delivery of the line, in order to win a war, you've got to become war. And then Goldsmith sort of pauses the soundtrack in order to emphasise that line, and it kind of gives us a clue of what's coming next in this film.
What do you want?
To win, to survive.
Not so easy to survive. Still war here.
Survive a war. You gotta become war.
That why they pick you? Because you like to fight?
I'm expendable.
Expendable. What mean expendable?
So this little boat ride with this nice flowing soundtrack into the area where the POW camp is allegedly supposed to be is pretty much the last quiet point of this movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's also the line which we'll call back to in probably about 25 years' time, where he describes himself as expendable.
Yeah.
Which probably made him another couple of $100 million.
Yeah, and he got a whole new franchise out of it as well.
Still waiting for Expendables 4.
I kind of tuned out after 2, but Harrison Ford's in 3, so I should probably give that a watch.
Yeah, Harrison Ford, Kelsey Grammer, you know, the real heavy hitters of action films.
Yeah, of 80s action films. I'd just like to go on record and say I refuse to acknowledge the 5th Rambo film as a Rambo film, because it is awful, and we will never do a podcast about it because it does not. It's like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal something that also doesn't exist.
I mean, again, it's probably a good time. I mean, the 5th film, at time of recording, I think has just come out on DVD. And you think about that film, and we talk about how the films have removed themselves from the first movie more and more. I mean, particularly the second half of Rambo 5, or Last Blood, or whatever it's called.
It's the A-Team, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like you've taken part of Taken and then added a Saw film at the end.
Yeah. And they just flipped the genre completely on its head and gone away from where we started. Because at the end of Rambo 4, of course, he's back in the M65 jacket walking down to his father's ranch, and it rounds off the story quite nicely.
But he left it open for Rambo 6.
He did, sitting on his deck chair.
Oh, looking comfortable. So in this one, he's got off the boat with the pirates, he's got to the camp, and more prostitutes and everything else.
Oh, just one thing as well. When he looks at Ko's little medallion,
of course,
and she said, "This bring me luck," and it's obviously Buddha, and it brings me luck. And she says, "What bring you luck?" in that sort of clipped Vietnamese Hawaiian stereotypical accent, and he holds up his knife. And I thought at the time, even at 13, I thought, didn't bring you a fucking lot of luck and hope, did it? Because it kind of got you arrested. It kind of got you arrested for carrying a concealed weapon and led to you being locked up in the first place. But
brings you a lot of luck / blood / various other things. So we're at the camp. He's got his. This is where they find the first POW camp.
Yeah, so they're wrecking the first POW camp, and what we see is prostitutes on mopeds going into a camp where we hinted that there's some very lax security. And we get a little shot of Rambo building his bow, and he, you know, in order to explain it to the audience, he tells Ko it's a bow, no sound. And he's going to go and do his recce. And given that they've just arrived at the camp on the first night, it's amazingly fortuitous that on his first recce he not only manages to gain entry to the camp, but find a shitload of POWs. Yeah.
And even it's mentioned to him, Ko says about orders, he says, no more orders. Yeah. Once he realises that there are POWs here, I'm not leaving. This is where the immediate split between his orders of recce. We know from the beginning, you know, Rambo is not going to stand there, look at POWs and go, okay, well, I'll take my Polaroid back.
Yeah, you know. But he knows at the moment he can't rescue them all. Yeah. So what he does is he looks for... he looks into a cage and he sees a lot of bedraggled US soldiers in uniforms in various races, and we led
rats,
to rats and malaria and all
Yeah.
sorts. But he sees a character called Banks tied up on almost like a cross bamboo crucifix, and he cuts Banks down, and he rescues Banks, who can barely walk. And we're 35 minutes into the film where we get our first kill, which is a short distance knife throw straight into the chest of the first guard. And then the second comes not long after, where he fires a longbow straight into a watchtower.
And then within a couple of minutes, we've got a fella getting a bow straight through his skull. And
that's the guy that pings Coe with a pistol.
Yeah.
And we think Coe's just about to buy the farm. And then he gets pinned to a tree with a crossbow bolt, a longbow bolt.
I mean, the setup for this, it's a very similar camp to the one in Rambo 4 in Burma.
Yeah.
When he goes to rescue the do-gooders, Christians. And this one, I suppose, at least Rambo 4, it's a bit more progressive. You know, instead of taking female prostitutes in, they take male prostitutes.
Yes.
It's progressive. Things have changed. But yeah, it's the same camp. Everything's bamboo, so everything blows up a lot quicker, and it's just fantastic. And then after Rambo, Coe, and the POW, they make their way out, and the whistles kick off.
Yeah, we got that lovely sort of 1960s carry-on police whistle sound where the camp knows it's been breached.
Yeah, we've got Dixon of Dock Green running down.
It is a Dixon of Dock Green police whistle. So we've got Rambo, Coe, and Banks escaping from the camp.
Yeah.
And Coe asks Banks a few questions about, how long have you been there? A couple of weeks. They move us around. We haven't been in that camp for a year. And this great line where Banks says, "What year is it anyway?"
Yeah.
Knowing that the war ended in 1972, and Rambo turns around and says 1985.
It's almost like a Back to the Future joke.
It is almost like a Back to the Future joke.
Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
And Banks does, to be fair, the actor playing Banks does a wonderful surprised impersonation that he's been a POW for 13 years and being moved around paddy fields. And they need to escape back to the junk boat with the pirates on, which they do. They pull successfully.
Yeah, but it doesn't take long for them to show their true colours.
No. What you do is
sold out.
They get onto the junk boat and you think they're making their way back to the extraction. And we get a lovely cutaway shots and more pointless computer, because back in Thailand they're kind of following this mission, and we keep getting these wonderful cut shots to this control room, and everything in it's pointless.
Yeah,
because he's only got
flashing
he
lights.
only took one radio.
Yeah.
Everything's flashing it's like airplane. It's like the control tower in airplane. There's loads of guys sitting around doing.
There's one scene. It looks like Murdoch is looking at a screen that looks a bit like teletext. It's like he's waiting for the football score to
There's a
come
sweeping
up.
radar going around with the planes down and the helicopters hasn't taken off yet. So what on earth are you sweeping for?
I don't think they have GPS on Rambo's knife, but and they're sitting there, and all of a sudden the pirates have sold out. Rambo immediately knows because there's Russian weapons on board, and it doesn't take him long to kill everyone on board.
Yeah, Stallone gets a slap. He
Yeah.
gets a backhanded slap around the face by the boat captain. They get captured. And you can see the hair goes across his eyes, and you can see the anger.
They touched his hair.
They touched his hair. His wonderful shaggy perm that has improved tenfold since he was in prison.
Yeah.
It's really, really good haircut for the mid-'80s, and very, very kind of soft rock Europe Final Countdown type Rambo hair.
It's obviously someone in his cell block who's done it as a part-time job.
Yeah, we've been sold out, betrayed, and he calls the captain a bastard. You bastard. And then we get 6 people killed in quick succession. We get one guy killed with a double stabby in the knife chest, and then Rambo off 6 pirates with a shotgun.
Before they can return in.
Coe takes 2 out with an AK, and then the gunboat, the NVA gunboat, starts absolutely ripping the junk to bits with sustained heavy machine gun fire.
Because Coe and Banks have already jumped ship.
They've leapt off, and Rambo is about to open the Russian boxes with the RPG-7 to take out the gunboat, but he's about to be throttled by somebody that he missed.
Yeah, but luckily this guy is laying on a canopy
made of wicker.
Made of wicker, so you can just get the knife straight through without any issues. Yeah, that didn't last very long.
No, so we get this wonderful shot of Rambo taking out the NVA gunboat with the RPG-7, and the back. It's really really nice tight shot of the backdrop of that weapon just blowing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the NVA gunboat is going to drift into the junk.
Yeah.
Quite why it's going to blow it to smithereens just by sort of crashing into it slowly is not really...
Well, I suppose it's like an episode of The Simpsons where anything that falls off a cliff explodes in a... You know, I'm not sure what other weapons they had on the boat, but there must have been something...
For something that was crashed slowly into it, it didn't half go up in flames a bit lively. It's a really good stunt, actually. You can tell it's live action, and it's probably done on wires, but whoever's doubling Stallone in that stunt...
Goes flying out.
Absolutely goes flying out the boat. And then the big triumphant Jerry Goldsmith's swell, because obviously he disappears under the water and then he emerges.
And then you've got Coe shouting, "You made it, Rambo!"
Yeah, and by the time, of course, he gets out the shore, he's sopping wet, but 20 seconds later he's bone dry and ready to make his extraction.
This has been where he's told, "You're not expendable."
Yes.
Oh.
So he's about to leave. The helicopter's inbound to come and get him, and he says goodbye to Coe, and the helicopter's inbound for 3 minutes, and he gives her his bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Not sure why he does that. I'm sure that's going to have some relevance later, said nobody. And she says, Julia Nixon delivers perfectly, "Rambo, you're not expendable," as he goes running up the hill. But unfortunately, Sergeant Vin and Lieutenant Vin has zeroed Banks's position, and they are going to get mortared on the way up this hill. So you've got this great action scene now of Rambo and Banks running through a muddy paddy field with an AK, trying to clamber up a hill to a helicopter extraction while they're getting the shit shelled out of them.
So I lost track of how many people died in this scene, because obviously as the innocent viewer, the independent party in this, we're watching as they're making their way through. And this is another almost thing where they've called back to in Rambo 4, where there's the game at the start where the Burmese soldiers are mortaring the paddy
throwing
fields
landmines into paddy fields for people to run across.
Yeah, and this is a very similar setup to this. Stallone and the POW are running through and the helicopter to extract them at present is still on their way to help.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes out and it's inbound.
And and as it turns up, there's a gunship, so of course they're busy providing air support.
Well, this is the odd thing, because as Leifer and Troutman and that come in, Leifer mans the GPMG on the Huey and starts strafing the NV up. Now, call me Mr. Covert Operations, but that's kind of going to bring the Americans into having a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah.
Although they're supposed to be mercenaries and therefore they could be disavowed and expendable. So at this point, the extraction's on, and they're assisting Rambo in getting up to the extraction point, up until the point that Troutman looks down below and says, "Christ, he's found one."
Yeah.
And Martin Coe's character reports this back to Murdoch, Charles Napier, and says, asks him to confirm that he's found a POW, and you see Murdoch shit himself and realise that he's bitten off more than he can chew here, and he tells them to abort.
I mean, we already knew from the beginning that Murdoch is a wrong'un.
Yeah, I've written down here, at the point that we realise Murdoch's a wrong'un, I've put, everybody is thrown out of the pointless computer room. And then he gets on the horn and says, "I'm telling you to abort. I'm telling you to leave them."
And this is where Troutman realises, they're mercenaries.
Yeah. So Troutman says to Leifer, "We're going down," and Leifer pulls a pistol on him and says, "You're not going anywhere." He says, "They're our men down there. They're our men." And he says, "No, they're your men, Colonel. Don't be a hero."
See, now, we talked about this off air. The person who was originally cast as Leifer was Robert Davi.
Which just would have made this film... It's good, this film. It's great. But Robert Davi and Martin Coe manning that helicopter would have just taken it.
Robert Davi is a mercenary.
Well, what would have been great about this was you'd have got Robert Davi on an M60 machine gun strafing from a helicopter, which would have set up that line in Die Hard so much better. Well, it's just I was in junior high, dickhead. So you'd have got that wonderful... I always wonder whether that line in Die Hard was like a little... That could have been me in Rambo doing the strafing. Because Leifer, you never feel that at any point that if Stallone was pissed at him, that he would do anything other than snap him in half. Yeah, because
we talked about this. He doesn't present himself as any kind of military hero.
Not in any way. There's no bearing to him. He doesn't look like a special forces mercenary, does he?
And he's dressed like the sort of person who hangs around in a dodgy bar in the middle of the afternoon. And so that when he shows this back to Troutman saying they're your men, you kind of think, if Troutman, obviously he's not exactly in a position of power, what he's a colonel, special forces, whatever.
Yeah.
Push him out. Do something. If you think you're that, Rambo would have thrown him out.
He gets to say "you goddamn mercenaries," doesn't he? So we know that
because he has a gun pulled on him.
He does. It's a Sig Sauer P226 as well. First appearance of that particular handgun on film. It was a very new handgun.
Yeah. Product placement.
Yeah, it's used extensively through law enforcement around the world, and the nickel-plated ones were used in Reservoir Dogs. So it's the same. It's the Reservoir Dogs pistol, the very tall.
I wonder where that's where they got them from for the heist. Yeah.
Quite possibly, but yeah. So the long and short of it, you get George P. Cosmatos gives this wonderful lingering shot of Stallone looking up at the helicopter, and Martin Cove's character. Whose name escapes me because he's just...
Erickson.
It is Erickson, isn't it? Looking out of the pilot's window of the helicopter with utter contempt at Rambo, who's got his arm raised. Come on, come down, and the helicopter flies off, and then you get this beautiful cinematically perfect wide shot of the entire North Vietnamese army closing in on John Rambo and Banks.
Yeah.
And Rambo, the way that the AK-47 hits the ground with a clatter when he surrenders, and that sort of completes the first act of the film. The mission's been a failure, and Rambo himself has now been captured. So
we get the cut back to the base. Troutman confronts Murdoch, and this is where the whole plot around it being they're paying lip service to the fact that there may be POWs there because there were issues previously with the Vietnamese government around reparations and blackmail for basically buying back their own people.
And this is a little bit confusing, isn't it, this bit? Because unless you realise what was going on at the time, you're not really sure why he was abandoned, if they were going... Yeah. But he's pretty much achieved what he was supposed to achieve.
We're almost watching it now in 2020, benefiting from this being history rather than live.
Yeah.
I guess it's like most of these films, having access to, admittedly, Wikipedia. But at least we know that, but if you go in this and you're, teenager, 20, especially watching it in this country, you go into this film in the cinema, so...
Well, what you get is a sort of tacit admission from Murdoch that if Rambo had done what he was supposed to do and take photographs, those photos would have been lost anyway, and they wouldn't have found their way back to Congress. Yeah. So he was set up, he was busted out of prison and set up from the start because he wasn't supposed to find anything. You also get the hint that Murdoch knows that there are POWs there, but deliberately sent Rambo to the camp that he thought was empty. Yeah. Because Coa's hinted, camp's supposed to be empty. Yeah. You're supposed to have come here, taken your photos of the empty camp, and then they could have wrapped it all up. Yeah. And now Murdoch's not worried yet, but Rambo's... Yeah. Troutman hints to Murdoch that he's going to live to regret that decision. Yeah.
This is something they mentioned earlier about Rambo. I can't remember which point it was, where... they basically described him as... I've written this down. If winning means he has to die, he'll die.
Yeah.
And that just describes this new Rambo.
Yes.
Very accurately indeed.
So we established that he's been abandoned on direct command, and then we cut back to the prisoner of war camp, and Rambo's been placed in a cesspit. Yeah. I mean, it does look... Stallone actually said about that, some of the leeches in this were real. Right. They did this in Mexico, and they did it with like wallpaper paste and stuff that was supposed to look like mud. But because they'd shot it over 2 days, and they shot it in the jungle, real water had leaked in, and he said, Stallone said the stink was... He was supposed to be naked in this, but they ended up putting a loincloth on him because there were real leeches and all sorts of jungle nasties, and everybody... apparently the whole crew had malaria on this shoot, and because it was shot just outside Acapulco in the Mexican jungle. And what we get here is Stallone in a Vietnamese cesspit, and I've put here 49 minutes, ! Burkoff.
Yeah, I've got Burkoff gets off chopper.
Yeah, I've written Burkoff ! And in big capital letters, I've written The West is decadent.
I've got decadent in big capital letters. It's like an episode of Countdown on the radio.
It really is.
The West is decadent.
So we get this big entrance from Stephen Burkoff, who is now... we are the Russian villain in Octopussy. Yeah. We are the principal villain... Russian villain in Octopussy 1983. Principal villain in Beverly Hills Cop 1984. And now we're literally playing the same Russian that we played in Octopussy. Lieutenant Colonel Podolsky of the Spetsnaz in Rambo First Blood Part 2. And it's a big entrance. He gets a massive rousing... He gets his own theme, his own sort of Russian foreboding theme. And he gets to walk sort of flanked by all his troops. And he looks great, Burkoff, in this Spetsnaz outfit.
And he looks like he's loving life.
Only Richard Burton could have hammed this entrance up better than Burton. Burkoff absolutely milks this entrance. And you can tell that Cosmatos loves him.
I think I'm at the point now where, at the time of recording, this will have been the 5th episode I've done where Burkoff has featured.
Really?
So there's Octopussy, Beverly Hills Cop this. He was in Absolute Beginners as a far-right lunatic doing a speech. And he was also referenced in The Tall Guy.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, so where...
fuck off.
Jeff Goldblum was doing his
And the same goes for your friend. You fuck off.
You fuck off. It's like the Emperor arriving on the Death Star in Return of the Jedi.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It is the Emperor arriving on the Death Star.
And this is the interrogation where, even though it's Burkoff, he's trying to play it nice. It's almost like, I suppose the closest, and it looks very similar, is Hannibal Lecter turning on the charm.
Well, the first person cast for this was Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that would have been...
So that would have been interesting, but apparently Stallone bought him out of the contract. He was cast. He was in. So, but Stallone had to buy off his contract because he said, look, I can't release 2 films in a year where the Russian protagonist is the same guy, albeit in 2 different films.
And it's hard to imagine as well. I mean, this is something we do in a lot of the episodes where had they cast that person, it would have been very different.
Yeah.
You've got Burkoff, who is maniacal and has these bulging eyes and everything's decadent. Dolph Lundgren, who had about... let's be honest, about 4 lines in Rocky IV and had a non-speaking role in A View to a Kill.
With Lundgren cast as Podolsky, you don't need Yashin, do you?
No.
So what they've done with Burkoff is they've given him the job, and then they thought, well, we need someone for Stallone to fight later.
Yeah.
So what we're going to have to do is find that equivalent Russian beefcake. Because Yashin doesn't really achieve much other than setting up the sort of electroshock bed.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have a line in the whole film.
No, I don't think he does.
I mean, one Russian line on the helicopter lake, which we assume means open fire or something like that. But
because he gets summoned.
Yes,
but that's about it. I mean, I just put a muscular Vinnie Jones.
Yes.
And this is again where, if you'd had Lundgren in that role, it might have made a bit more sense.
Yeah, I think you could have had you could have probably had 2 characters in one.
Yeah.
You would have only needed one protagonist doing the torture, and you could have had. So you don't even get a sort of good cop, bad cop, do you?
No. You get sort of charming cop and oaf.
An oaf sort of. I mean, almost like the Frankenstein's monster from Young Frankenstein. Yeah. He just stands there being oafish and electrocuting people on beds connected to car batteries.
And as he's, we're talking, this is an interrogation scene, and he's saying about you've been captured for espionage, and this is where, again, another divergence from First Blood, where Rambo took a lot of his punishment, the forced shaving in the first movie, as very silent, brooding. This time he turns around and says, fuck you.
Which is interesting, because in the cutscenes from First Blood, you can see that it's the capture and the torture at the hands of the Vietnamese that trigger the post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. When the marshal goes in with the razor, you get that shot of the bayonet being stroked across his chest and him screaming and him flipping out and escaping from the police station in Washington. But it's a very different Rambo we've got here, a very belligerent. I've been through. Almost like I've been through this before, but Stallone again it's all very glistening. He's been stripped off bare chested now. Stallone's not going to wear a shirt now for the rest of the.
No, he's got plenty of baby oil.
Yes.
So this is where, as you mentioned, he gets essentially electrocuted on a bed frame,
and he holds out, and Stallone's and Rambo's not giving anything away until Burkoff, Podolsky brings Banks in. Yeah. And while he's been torturing him, he's been heating up his knife, Rambo's knife. And the long and short of it is that they're going to stick it in Banks's eye. Yeah. And at which point, Rambo relents and agrees to radio his headquarters, and he's going to read a script that Podolsky's written for him, which is no such further insertions are going to be attempted into the Communist Republic of Vietnam, and you're to stop doing this, and everybody... and you get this great scene of Stallone being frog-marched to the microphones, not too different to what we're saying right now. Sat down, and you get this wonderful sound effect as Rambo grabs the mic. And he puts in his call signs, Stallone with colourful names. And he gets through. First time, they do a few dials on the radio, and he gets through to the basic Thailand.
State-of-the-art technology.
First time, because there must be all those computers in that room.
But what we have had is Burkoff loving reading out the transcript of the call from Murdoch.
Dragonfly Wolf Den. Colourful names.
You have been left behind.
Yes. Yeah, they got the whole transcript of the radio conversation between Troutman and Murdoch, and it seems you were abandoned on direct command.
And this is, again, it's almost like Burkoff's giving Rambo that energy to go on and think, obviously Rambo would have been 99.9% sure
that he'd been betrayed by Murdoch.
And now it's like, well, here are the words that we used.
Yes, here it is.
And I'm a legitimate source.
This is your little bit of exposition. If you're going to take some revenge, this is how you're going to do it. They abandoned you on direct command.
And of course, as you said, Rambo gets through straight away. There's no issues there.
And Murdoch does his best weaselly... tell us where you are, we'll come and get you.
Yeah.
Which
and at that point, we know. And Rambo just says, Murdoch, I'm coming to get you.
And that point, Coe having entered the base and hiding just outside, disguised as a prostitute with an Uzi Mac-10 with a silencer. God knows where she got that, but she's got it.
Where does she hide it?
They escape. He leaps. He throws Sergeant Yashin onto the bed and turns the electrocution up to full. Leaps out the window, and they make their escape from the POW camp. Just him and Coe.
Chased by all and sundry, they manage to get themselves into a position of relative safety. And,
there's grenades. He lifts up barbed wire with his bare hands. It's a really good escape, and it's a really rousing soundtrack. It's a great bit of 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And then we break to daylight again, and Coe and Rambo have sort of got far enough away from the camp that we get love story section of the film.
This is about the only romantic scene we get in the whole of the 5 movies.
Yes. And Coe says to, Rambo, maybe go to America, live the quiet life, you take me with you. And he agrees, and they kiss, and then Lieutenant Vin guns her down.
I almost counted how many seconds between her saying that and her dying.
It's less than 90 seconds, isn't it? It's less than a minute between... She's going to start a new life in the USA with John Rambo, and they're all going to live happily ever after and have lots of children, and she's gunned down immediately. It
reminded me of the scene in The Hunt for Red October where Sam Neill is talking about he wants to retire to Montana.
Yes.
And then, well, he's going to cop it then, isn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. And profile... I'm getting really quite good at being a Marine in Heartbreak Ridge that we've already done. It's like, well, he's going to die in the end battle. What's really interesting about the Russians that are chasing them just before Coe dies is they've got a lot of American equipment.
Okay.
They have a Huey helicopter, a Jeep. I suppose that you could make a case that the Americans did leave a lot behind in Vietnam, and that it might have been reappropriated by the enemy.
Paint a hammer and sickle on it, you'll be fine.
In the escape with Coe just before she gets killed, there's a lot of this way nonsense. Well, and there's Russians and Vietnamese running everywhere at this point, all over the place in different directions.
They're all sort of formed as one at this point.
Yeah,
they're basically working together.
Yeah, looking for two people that there's helicopters flying overhead, but they fall in love and they kiss, and within a minute of Coe being kissed by Rambo, she's shot and dies.
Yeah,
and this is the exact point in the film where the film goes absolutely bonkers. Yeah. From the point where he buries her in the mud, and he tears off a strip of her dress to use as what we now know as the traditional red Rambo headband. He is pissed now,
and he also takes her necklace as well.
He takes her lucky necklace, and we go on now a 10-minute Russian and Vietnamese killing spree. And this is a nod back to... This is the only bit where you've got a little nod back to First Blood, in that just before the bit that I call the Mud-Eye reveal, which is one of the greatest bits in the film, he's picking them off like he did the deputies in the jungle. So we've got that little First Blood so that we know that it's like a Rambo film. And apparently Stallone and Cosmatos said this was deliberate. It was absolutely deliberate. Before they got that you really wanted to take the battle to the protagonists, they wanted this little 10-minute segment of Rambo picking them off, and everybody loved that scene in First Blood where he runs into the forest and he picks off the deputies one by one. But of course, this time he's not recognising them as US police officers, and he's wounding them, gratuitously wounding them. They had tourniquets, and one of them was never going to walk again after walking down a spear trap, and he stabs one in the leg, doesn't he, in the top of the thigh with the hunting knife. But this, I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. Right up until the 1 hour 10 point of this film, which I've just put in capital letters Mud Eye. Yeah. And this is one of my favourite scenes in the whole film, and it's everybody's favourite scene, where you've got a Russian Spetsnaz commando looking very stern and sort of scanning his arcs and looking all around. And then you just see this one eye open in the mud, and John Rambo comes out of the mud and sinks a Bowie knife straight into his rib cage.
Well, like we talked about before, this film probably inspired a huge amount, and this is a very similar scene to what we get in Predator later on, where Schwarzenegger's hiding in the mud to escape the Predator.
Yeah.
And this is Stallone fully camouflaged in mud, which washes off amazingly well.
From Mud Eye onwards, I've written absolute chaos, pointless running, triumphant music. And that's all you get for 10 minutes after Coe's dead. Yeah. He literally picks off 75 people and kills them single-handedly before running into what I've called the chicken village.
Well, this is the chicken village where he runs into village and you suddenly feel like, he might be looking out for the innocent people.
Oh, he's bone dry out of the mud by this point, and he's glistening again and covered in baby oil.
He's already rinsed himself, but the oil remains. We're running through, we're seeing a lot of locals, elderly Vietnamese gentlemen sitting there wondering what's going on, and we get that lingering shot of a chicken.
Yes.
Just half a second too long. And we know that this chicken plays an important part in this film.
Yes. Yeah. But we don't quite know what yet. So, we've got this wonderful shot of a chicken sitting next to a petrol can, just in case you needed any further exposition of what's about to go on here. This is the point that it struck me, because he destroys he runs into the chicken village and then gets a vantage point where he destroys all the vehicles with his bow. Yeah. Now, for someone sent to take photographs, he had a fuck ton of explosives with him.
I mean, we only saw the little compartment where it looked like he had maybe 5.
Yeah.
That was probably the 6th or 7th little case of those he had.
But he didn't miss a vehicle, did he? He took out every vehicle on the bridge.
And how did he run, carrying all that stuff? Again,
well, it wasn't on him, was it? He just escaped from a prisoner of war camp. Unless Coe turned up with his bow, his arrow, and a massive Bergen full of ordnance, he cut this stuff away from the aircraft. But he kept it.
And this is where one of the most famous scenes of this is where he's caught in what looks very similar to the prison quarry at the beginning. He's caught in the stream by one gunner just taking shots.
Yeah, so Lieutenant Vin, the protagonist who killed Coe. Of course, we've got the chicken village, but we've got to explain the chicken. So,
what came first?
Yes, what came first, the exploding Vietnamese lieutenant or the chicken? So, by blowing up all the vehicles, he lures half the NVA into the long grass, and he's cut the head off a chicken and trailed its blood to make them think he's wounded. And what's wonderful about this is you've got them walking through the grass looking for him, thinking they're following his blood. None of them smell the petrol that he's scattered everywhere until they see the dead chicken in the petrol can.
They go, that's what the smell
that's
was.
What he's done. And of course, at that point, he sends an exploding arrow down into the lake of petrol and sets probably about 40 men on fire.
Caught in the quarry, the stream by the lieutenant. God knows how many shots he has. I mean,
he empties an AK magazine. He empties his entire AK magazine at Rambo, missing him with every shot. Yeah. Then discards the AK and pulls out a Tokarev pistol and starts shooting at Rambo. And Rambo, not realising that he's out of pistol range, triumphantly stands on the rock, draws back his longbow, and you get this wonderful, wonderful lingering shot of. They zoom right in. Cosmatos zooms right in on the arrowhead so that we know it's one of the exploding ones. Rambo draws back his longbow, and very similar to Yaphet Kotto's exit in Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
He doesn't inflate before he blows up, but he does go like a balloon.
Yeah, do zoom right in, don't they?
Yeah, and he goes, and you get the wonderful pained look on his face just before this exploding arrow hits him square in the chest and blows him into a million pieces.
I mean, one film I will mention that obviously parodied this was, have you seen UHF?
No.
Sort of Weird Al Yankovic in it, and there's this sort of montage scene of him, it's basically his imagination, and he's done up like Rambo in this, and he shoots someone with an explosive arrow, although he's only about 3 foot away from them.
Really?
And similar effects.
My favourite pastiche of this was Charlie Sheen in Hot Shots Part 2, where he
Yeah.
actually picks up the chicken
Yeah.
and fires the chicken into the and the chicken's got the big bulbous
Yeah.
eyes. It's been parodied a lot.
And then all of a sudden the helicopter comes down.
Yeah, so I've written Huey with a barrel bomb, which is the Huey helicopter, and it's got a great big barrel bomb in it. It's been piloted by Sergeant Yashin, the Vinnie Jones on steroids type Russian goon. And then I've written slow-mo Baywatch running, because Stallone gets his moment, and all you need there is the I'll Be Ready Baywatch soundtrack. You get arm-pumping Stallone running away, trying to outrun a helicopter.
It does
Fair
well.
one.
Yeah.
They drop an enormous sort of napalm barrel bomb from the helicopter. And again, the stunt work. Now, this is the stunt that allegedly. This is the one that we think killed Cliffhanger Jr.
Right,
The stunt man that was killed making this film in Mexico.
It was dedicated to him.
The film was dedicated to him at the end, and it's he took a dive over a cliff. The stuntman took a dive over a cliff.
Okay.
And we believe that the footage in this was Cliffhanger.
Really? Okay.
And his family allowed Stallone and Cosmatos to keep, and Mario Casaro and Andrew Vachon to keep the stunt in, because it was the last stunt he did.
Okay.
And from what I was able to glean, the dive off the cliff it wasn't sort of the Spy Who Loved Me, quite, but it was. I mean, he didn't survive it, so with the audience going off as well, and they don't know whether it was the squib that knocked him unconscious before he took the dive, but they left the stunt in, and it's a stunt that killed the stuntman.
The helicopter lowers down afterwards, and
we can only assume that there was a trampoline of sorts under the water here.
Yeah.
Because Rambo manages to come from being fully concealed under the water to a full leap from the water onto the ski of the helicopter.
He does well, doesn't he?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Good power. He's obviously not skipped leg day.
No.
Now, Rambo and
Yashin.
They fight in the helicopter. And I wrote here, this helicopter fight was better than the one at the beginning of Spectre.
I've also written leaps on Hilo, big fight like Spectre.
Yeah. Two men going at it in the back of a helicopter.
But done better than Sam Mendes did it.
Yeah, because this one wasn't all CGI heavy.
The other thing that this reminded me of is when he's got Yashin's face and he's holding it out and stuff. It reminds me of the scene in Top Secret in the opera box, and you kind of half expect when he lets go of Stallone's face for the clay to be like the 3-finger indentation in his face.
Oh, that would have been glorious.
But yeah, I also wrote this is a big fight just like Spectre.
And that's what it is. And again, we find Rambo or Bond wins the fight.
Yeah.
The pilot is then disposed of afterwards.
Well, in the Rambo fight, he decides to leap out.
Yeah.
Right? I think Daniel Craig pushes the pilot out, doesn't he? Of the helicopter he takes in Spectre before Sam Smith leaps into our eardrums.
And then we learn that Rambo is also an accomplished pilot.
Now, this is really interesting because Rambo was taken into the army in 1964 and he was special ops. We know that he was part of a Delta Force type unit from First Blood, but somewhere in there where he did all this action and he was a POW in Vietnam, he also learned to fly a helicopter.
Yeah.
We need him for the film because otherwise he's not going to escape, because he takes over the helicopter, of course, and flies.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Of course, he's not going to head for Thailand, is he? Once he's got a helicopter, no. We've got to go back and get some people.
He's got a mission.
But to cross-train special forces as helicopter pilots, as enlisted men.
It's an expensive business.
It really is an expensive business, and you don't tend to let them men go on Delta Force type missions. You tend to let them fly helicopters.
Yeah, and I guess these don't have many simulators or anything like that. This is, but then how did James Bond be able to fly a helicopter like that? Maybe.
Well, he did, didn't he?
Well, yeah, he did on the old computer they used. What we also learn about this helicopter is it's armed to the tits.
Yes.
With pretty much every weapon going.
So rather than just extract to Thailand and think we'll put this one down as a bad lot, Rambo. I've written Rambo has the helicopter, blows the entire camp to fuck. Yes. Is what I've written here. So he returns to the POW camp, and without wounding a single POW, he strafes the shit out of this POW. And this is very much like the cutscene you see in True Romance, where the director that's buying the cocaine from Christian Slater is filming Body Bags 2. So you see this Huey armed with all sorts of rockets strafing the shit out of the Vietnamese POW camp.
And a full-on Rambo sort of screaming, while he's doing it.
Well, I've also written in brackets here, this was the best bit of the ZX Spectrum Rambo First Blood Part 2 game.
I never played that.
Do you know what? It was amazing. And the loading screen itself, it took 5 minutes to load from a tape, and you had this great loading screen. And basically you started as this little pixelated Rambo with the knife, and you could wander around and you could find the bow and arrow. You had to keep the knife always. You always had the knife as your default weapon, but you could find the bow and arrow, the machine gun, and then the explosive arrowheads. Yeah. And then the idea was to get into the camp, you had to release Banks.
Right.
And then you could go, once you'd released Banks, you could go back to the camp, you could then find the helicopter. And then once you had the helicopter, you could fly back and strafe the shit out of the camp. And it was the best part of the ZX Spectrum game. Anybody that was 14 years old in 1985 and the ZX Spectrum would have had the Rambo game.
So I had
Crash Smash, it was.
Cobra, Robocop, various other ones. But I've got one of those retro Pi gadgets where it's got all the old Spectrum games. I'm not going to have to dig it out.
You're going to have to dig out Rambo. Honestly, it's a great Jet Set Willy type third-person shooter game.
It can't be any worse than the Fourth Protocol one, which was, from what I remember from looking at on YouTube after, the game is literally, you have to file things in the right filing cabinet.
The Fourth Protocol had a video game tie-in.
Yep.
What was it called? Ports and Bloody Airports? Or
should have been. Acting Ed Sunshine. And this was, and again, I remember there was a video game for Death Wish 3 where, like the film, I think you're just running around Lambeth blowing people up.
But Death Wish 3 was Michael Winner's one in South London, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's filmed in
Brixton. Yeah.
Oh, glorious.
Terrible. Did he have a 66 rocket launcher in that as well? That's got a similarity coming up.
I think that was at the end where he blew Brad from Superman 3 out.
That's right, yeah.
And very similar to the ending of Death Wish 4 as well. Oh, memories. Anyway, back to Rambo.
So he's flying around in the helicopter, and he basically, without any collateral damage, so he lands the helicopter in the base, grabs the M60 off the side of the helicopter, and deals with any remaining NVA and Russian troops. I've put, he loads and shoots everyone, and he does. He literally shoots everybody.
Gets them to the chopper, where he's suddenly chased by
Burkoff in a gunship.
Which I'm grinning like a nutcase.
Yeah, I basically have been singing Burkoff in a gunship to Girlfriend in a Coma by the Smiths. It's Burkoff in a gunship, Puma with a body kit. So it's a Puma, Aerospatiale Puma helicopter that had all the Hind. It was made to look like a Russian Hind gunship. And again, you get this foreboding Stephen Burkoff gets his own sort of Imperial March type.
And there's lots of close-ups of Burkoff in a helicopter helmet, grinning.
Just grinning maniacally so we get a bit of helicopters chasing helicopters, a bit of a helicopter dogfight. There's a couple of bits. An interesting bit where Banks, who could barely walk when Rambo rescued him the first time, is now manning a minigun.
He's very good. Good shot. Yeah.
Well, the other thing as well, if you'd have riddled that Hind gunship with that minigun, it would have fallen out of the sky like matchwood. Those things fire like 6,000 rounds a minute, like 100 rounds a second. By the time you'd let go of the trigger, you'd have put 4 rounds through the hole the last one made.
Yeah, it's almost like accuracy wasn't the important thing here.
Not really. Yeah. It was about, but every weapon in this film is real. They insisted on it. They're blanks, obviously, but
and only one person died during the bank. It was fun. Yes. Now Rambo's chopper gets shot, and now we think it goes down.
Yeah.
And this is where they start being quite clever. Now we know there's about 7 minutes of this film left. The chopper lands. We see it in a stream, and Burkoff, being Burkoff, lands directly in front of it.
Yeah, it's like the Tiger going in for the kid. It's like we've got the critically wounded helicopter light and the smoke billowing out the sides, and Burkoff decides to pull level with it, lay right down in front of it, and you see him sort of flick the safety off the rocket he's going to use to destroy it.
Rambo's unconscious.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah. And then up he leaps with a 66 light anti-aircraft weapon. It's what we call a 66 Law, an anti-tank weapon. And he launches it straight through his own windscreen, which is cracked, then not cracked, then cracked again. But the backblast on that 66, when he launches that rocket at the helicopter, would have fried about 8 of the POWs that he had in the back.
They're all sat right behind him.
So he'd have literally killed about 6 of the people he'd rescued just by firing that. But Burkoff is no more. He's been blown into smithereens.
It's a more glamorous death than the one in Octopussy, anyway.
Yeah, which, Burkoff's chronically underused in Octopussy, isn't he?
I know.
He could have been the principal villain in that. We
Should have been.
We could have done away with all the Camel Khan stuff and the Fabergé eggs, and we could have just had mad Russian on the nuclear warpath.
But we were talking about this before. He had very little screen time in this film. He was probably available for a week.
Yeah.
And they crammed his scenes in.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that, and I know this is a Rambo film, it's not about the villain, but I think this film would have benefited even just for the pure Burkov factor. The Burkov, I don't know, well, there must be a name for it, a Burkov value somewhere. Having a bit more him in the film would have made this film a lot better. There's a direct correlation there.
But I think as well, it's such a tight film. You get this wonderful Millennium. As soon as he's blown Burkhoff up, you get like that Millennium Falcon moment of Stallone just flicking switches on this Huey, which is like, right, let's pretend it's not. It's like like when Harrison Ford walks in The Empire Strikes Back and hits the dashboard so that the lights come on. So you get Stallone flicking all these switches, and then we've got some critically wounded POWs, and we're going to fly back to the base.
But it's funny because the helicopter takes off absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's perfect now. Yeah, all that smoke billowing out the sides all stops.
And then within 20 seconds, right, the smoke's coming, he's got to make an emergency landing.
And it's all fucked again.
And as he's trying to get into the base, and everyone's kind of realising, oh, well, they're coming back, and Murdoch's making himself scarce. And as the helicopter eventually lands at the base, you can see all the dry ice machines in the corners just billowing out.
Yeah.
Very bumpy landing.
Very, very bumpy landing. Yeah. We get Rambo leaps off the helicopter to the base. The American soldiers, Troutman's reconciled with the American soldiers. He's still like, prepare for emergency landing POW. So all the actual US troops.
Well, he's taken charge, hasn't he?
Yeah, the CIA are making themselves scarce. Erickson is waiting for Rambo on the tarmac and says, "Rambo, glad you make it." Yeah. He just gets a sort of machine gun butt in the nads for his trouble. That's all he gets, really, isn't it?
It's more than Lifer gets.
Yeah.
Lifer gets a glare.
Yeah, gets a dirty look.
He runs into the base, blows everything up. Again, if these are real bullets, blimey.
Yeah, we get that lovely silhouetted First Blood homage shot of him silhouetted in the doorway with the M60 covered in belt-fed 7.62 ammunition again. And then one-handed shooting of the pointless control room that we never really established what it was doing there.
And more screaming.
Yes. Yeah. But that gets us some closure to one of the greatest scenes in the film, which is Rambo confronting Murdoch. And there's the slow... It's almost the way Han Solo releases his holster in Star Wars to off Greedo. We get a very similar shot of the press stud being released on the knife, on the sheath of the knife, as he marches into Murdoch's office. And Charles Napier looks great in this because he looks genuinely scared.
Scared and sweaty.
Scared and sweaty, and Rambo strides manfully into the office with the knife drawn, grabs him by the throat, pins him down on the desk, and he says, you know there's more of them out there, find them or I'll find you. Draws the knife back above his head and then slams it in the desk next to Murdoch.
Proper terror in his eyes as he's looking at the knife.
Charles Napier really milks this. It's really good. It's a really good scene, and you're really sort of on Stallone's side by then.
And this is where we're led into the main political part of this. As Rambo's walking out, Troutman says to him, "You'll get a second Congressional Medal of Honor for this. What do you want?" And then we're led into the speech.
I've put the speech.
Yeah.
The war, everything that happened here may be wrong, but damn it, don't hate your country for it.
Hey, I die for it.
And what is it you want?
I want what they want. And every other guy who came over here and spilt his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's what I want.
This would make anybody's eyes roll back so far in their heads. But David Morrell on the YouTube documentary, which is called We Get to Win This Time, apparently said that the vets love it. Ronald Reagan loved this film.
Wow.
He said, if we ever get into any trouble like we did in Grenada again, I know who to send in. And it's a very... Stallone believed that Rambo had sort of like a neutral, sort of liberal attitude given the fact that he's... that's another interesting thing. Remember when we hark back to Murdoch read out Rambo's record? He reads out that in Vietnam, the whole of the Vietnam War, from sort of 65 to 72, or 75, depending on how long you want to go in for Hanoi. So Rambo had 59 confirmed kills in Vietnam. Yeah. In this film, he offed 74 people on one mission.
Blimey. So how many unconfirmed kills did he have?
Well, we can't even count the ones... Yeah, he got 59 confirmed kills in the Congressional Medal of Honor. There were 85 kills in this film, and 74 of them were off by Rambo. So you can chalk a couple up to Coe. Yeah. There's a couple of POWs that get wasted by sort of Spetsnaz commandos at the end. So apparently we got 85 dead in this film, and 74 of them were killed by Rambo.
But yeah, he's a liberal and he's neutral and holding the government to account.
Yes.
So, I mean, when you compare it to the speech at the end of First Blood, and then
there's no comparison. There's no comparison. It's so cheesy. Yeah. And the only way you could make it worse would be to let your brother write a really shit soft rock song based on that speech. And thank God he didn't let him do that.
Oh, wait, hang on.
Yeah. He did.
Yeah. Oh, where's Frank when you need him?
It's a long road when you're on your own.
Yes.
That was bad enough in the first one, but... Oh my God, the song that this plays this movie. We've had such a good soundtrack from Jerry Goldsmith, a really rousing, triumphant hero-villain soundtrack in this. And we play this movie out with this absolute dog shit dirge.
Well, that one of we talked about this as well. This film was the only Rambo film nominated for an Oscar, which was for Best Sound Editing. It won several Razzies, worst actor, worst director,
worst adapted screenplay.
Yeah, and was it win or was it just nominated for worst song? And it was this one.
Yes,
it well, if it didn't win, it should have done.
Go on YouTube and play it in full. If you've never seen this movie, watch this movie. This is a great movie.
Yeah,
it's a great, terrible movie. It's 95 minutes of absolute cod shit, but it's great. It's peak Stallone. I think it's about 39 when he filmed this, wasn't he? And
he's in 85. Yeah,
he's in great shape. Stallone in this. He's in absolutely brilliant shape.
Well, this, as you said, this was filmed around the same time as Rocky IV when he was.
Yeah, he did.
I think on the episode with that, Dave described him as walnuts in a condom.
The message of Rocky IV and Rambo, First Blood Part 2, is Russians bad, Americans good, isn't it?
That's like life.
Yeah, I mean. Growing up in this period in the 80s, we were all shitting ourselves about nuclear war. Reagan was saber-rattling in Berlin, and Gorbachev had only just come to power. And I think Reagan gave his Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall a year, about 18 months after this came out.
Okay.
But I remember growing up, and we had When the Wind Blows, and we were all petrified of being blown up by the Russians. So they made a convenient bad guy back then.
Yeah, and they were magnificent. If only they'd had Burkhoff.
Yeah, if they'd had Burkhoff as a leader, we'd probably all be living in communist London now.
Yeah. Well, we're still self-isolating and everything else.
Yeah, as we record this, we're doing a 2 metre podcast. We're not looking at each other. We're 2 metres away with different microphones.
If the sound quality's off, we're masked up.
Yes. It's been an odd one doing a podcast in surgical gloves and hand sanitizer, and
we managed.
It's a strange times, but if you're listening to this during the COVID thing, we can only hope that this has brought you some light relief.
All we want is for our COVID to love us.
As much as we love it.
COVID, our new leader.
Yes.
Oh, Christ. Oh, on that depressing note, Simon, thank you for bringing your Betamax copy of Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Oh, it's a massive favourite of mine. I love this film. It's a go-to Saturday night nonsense, turn your brain off and just have a laugh movie.
It's like most of the episodes I seem to have done so far. Right, so as we discussed, you also did the Heartbreak Ridge episode. This was, we're not sure which one this will be. There'll be a couple more popping up at near various points in the future. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, we talked about earlier, but your Twitter feed, which is mostly dogs. Yeah,
my Twitter feed is basically me at work and showcasing people's dogs, Woody included, the lovely Woody who joined us for the podcast today, the lovely Black Labrador Woody. It's a sideway. There's no. My Twitter feed's a feed full of nonsense. It's just good fun. There's no sniping. There's no politics. There's no nastiness. It's just good, clean fun and an irreverent sideways look at life and people's dogs and my kitten. It's a kitten tribute feed at the moment.
As John Rambo would have himself.
Yes,
probably. Yeah. Anyway, now as is tradition, the podcast will play out on a song that was number one at the time of the film's release. which in the UK was the 30th of August 1985, and we were spoilt by UB40 and Chrissy Hind. I Got You, Babe.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know what's worse, that or Frank Stallone's It's a Long Road When You're on Your Own.
Now, I haven't got my list of previous podcasts. I've definitely done this one before. So, should we change it and should we play the Frank Stallone song?
Should we play the Frank Stallone? Because I think people need to hear it.
Yeah.
I think people need to hear it in its entirety. And if it makes your ears bleed, I'm really sorry.
Just don't press unsubscribe.
It's awful. It's awful. It's an awful song. It's an awful song. Awful.
I'm going to get my brother to do a theme tune for this podcast, and that'll be along the same level.
Yes.
Lovely. Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again.
We gave our hearts, we gave it all. Flame in the fire burns forevermore. Sorrow in believing, honor and truth, raced by us blindly, wrapped around our youth. Peace in our life, remember the call. Oh, a tear for my brothers, think of them all. Home of the brave, we'll never fall. The strength of our nation belongs to us all.
This episode is brought to you by executive producers Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, Matt Cunnington, Christian Dees, Andy Elliott, Chris Hopkins, Omar Zambon, Ian Madrell, Catherine Lowe, Mark Makin, Zoltan Vargo, Simon Smith, Matt Lee, Laurie Curran, Wayne McNally, Darren Hodgkins, Dan Wellington, Alex Hill and Adam Blake, and associate producer Chris Oakley. Visit patreon.com/Betamax Video Club for more information about bonus episodes, early access and more. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast on iTunes.